future
Well,
with a plant? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, if the county or install the wastewater treatment plant, that certainly change that situation. But at the present time, and that's, as far as I know, that's not in the works. And so you have to rely on the fact that there is no sanitary sewage services, and you have to go after what is referred to as dry industries.
Okay, but we have a number of industries that are around the 100 to 150, 160. Is that something that would still be able to happen or not?
Mr. Chair, I think that could still happen as long as the on-site septic systems can handle that, and there's not a lot of wastewater generated by the industrial process itself.
Councillor Height.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I feel that the whole west of Norfolk is being held back from many different methods here. I know my ward, it's too pretty to have industrial stuff, so we're not allowed to have jobs, apparently. But in Cortland, because it's dry, I don't see why we wouldn't, instead of building an $18 million plant, why we wouldn't just pump the sewage over to Tillsonburg. I don't know that their water bill is as high as our water bill, so those residents might actually be happier to get their water from Tillsonburg. But we need to do something in the west. Right now, I'm referring all my development applications for people to Tillsonburg. They don't want to come over to the east side. They want to stay out in the west, and Tillsonburg's getting all that industry. And they pay more taxes in Tillsonburg. We have the cheapest rates around for industrial land, and yet we're not capitalizing on that. So we're losing business to Tillsonburg. Cortland's falling behind. Or it's not, it's growing despite ourselves. But honestly, I don't know why we don't have a plan to push sewage back over to Tillsonburg, because the mall, I believe it's serviced out to there. It's not that big of a run. So, and it's better than the $18 million option.
They charge twice the rate out there than they do to their residents or their businesses in town. What we should do is annex Tillsonburg. That'll solve the problem. Councillor Wells. Councillor Wells? Oh, sorry. Councillor Black. Why did I write down Black? Wells, sorry.
Yeah, we look so much alike.
Yeah,
you know,
both the
so
same
hair
color
and all
hair, all
that.
three of us. That's good.
He's better looking than me. You know. I just wondered about, through to staff, do we have an area in here full of definitions? Is there some place that, because there's all kinds of words in here, and I'm going to give you an example, that no one knows what it really means, and that is prejudice the planned function. And I've raised this issue many, many times. What does it mean? Is there a threshold? All of a sudden, the trigger is clicked, and we have prejudiced the planned function? When is that? Where is that threshold? What is the definition? I'd like to see a definition of that and any other ambiguous terms, because that is totally ambiguous. It's, I'm looking at page 29C. It's at the top there. It's contained within the first sentence of C. Okay, prejudice the planned function. You've heard me say this before, and I still see it there. Don't know what it means. Well, I do know what it means, but what's the threshold? There has to be something that says, all of a sudden, you have prejudiced the planned function. We don't know. You know, you could drop a bomb. Oh, yep, that's it. We've prejudiced the planned function.
Mr. Chair, where we can, we put definitions of planned function into the text. For downtown areas, the planned function you'll find on page 24 in section 341.
So it's defined there?
Yes, it is.
Okay, on page 24?
Yeah.
351? All right.
Just first paragraph, second sentence.
Okay, but still, generally speaking, I mean, is there an area where you would have a section for definitions?
I think throughout the plan, we try to define terms
within the context?
Within the context, some plans have a definition section. We also rely on the definitions that are in the provincial policy statement.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Okay, moving on to hamlet areas. Any questions? I have one question. I drive through Elgin quite a bit, and there are a number of hamlets out there that seem to be able to keep going and going and going. I don't know how they do it, but we seem to be shut off, I guess. Is there any possibility of getting some additional land for some farmers who want to be in an urban area where they were originally grew up in? So is there any possibility that we can change the size of hamlets?
In the residential land supply report that I prepared, there is potential for additional development within hamlets. The basic conclusion I came to was that there's no need to expand hamlet boundaries to accommodate growth. As a whole, the hamlets have sufficient capacity to handle development over the next 20 years.
Okay, but basically what you're talking about is I guess, roads that will have to that come forward, and that's not what I see in Elgin or anything like that. They're all along either a county road or a municipality, the lower municipality or whatever. So theoretically, it's never going to happen in those hamlets because of the fact that you got to put in a road. You can't afford it.
To the Chairman, don't necessarily have to put in a road. Some of the potential that I identified are on the existing roads.
So when we get to the maps, we'll be able to have a look at that then. Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is somewhat along the same lines as yours. I'm on page 38 in the middle, where it says the following shall be the policy, and the designation of additional hamlet areas is not anticipated by the plan and shall be strongly discouraged. Does that mean, creating a new Linville or Lindock or Victoria or whatever, or is that intended to mean an expansion of an existing hamlet area? What is that first sentence meant to say?
Through the chair, that is about establishing a brand-new hamlet.
Good.
There is other policy further on that talks about expansion of existing hamlets.
Okay, thank you for that, Mary. And my second question, Mr. Chair, is at the bottom of the same page, although it appears elsewhere as well. And this is around the idea of potential for development within land designated as hazard. I know we went through this so carefully in our new zoning bylaw, and council members will recall that we changed wording in our new zoning bylaw such that within certain designated hazard lands, our zoning is permissive subject to approval by LPRCA. And that's as it should be, as far as I'm concerned. They are the technical experts that will determine where the hazard actually is in reality versus what's on a map, and whether the hazard can be overcome, i.e. by flood-proofing the building, et cetera, et cetera. So my concern is with those, that text in red at the bottom of page 38, is that text more restrictive, if you like, than the new policies of our new official plan?
Through the chair, I am aware that later when we get to the hazard lands section, it does talk about consultation with the Conservation Authority, so I think it's addressed there, but whether or not it needs to be revised here, we can undertake to look at whether this needs some revision.
Okay, I would appreciate that, Mr. Chairman, because I think we accomplished a lot when the zoning bylaw wording around this issue was finally approved, and I think everyone generally was satisfied with it. So I would not want to see wording in the new OP amendment be in any way at odds with what we have already done relative to zoning. So if Mary's willing to review that again, that's all I'm asking.
Okay. Councilor Black.
On your query there, Mr. Chairman, about hamlets, I just wondered, what is the development? Do we have some data? What is the actual development potential of the 42 hamlets that we have throughout Norfolk County? I mean, that's we do have quite a number of hamlets, and I think probably more in the west area than the east area. So do you have the number of lots that could be developed within those 42 hamlets?
Well,
Do you have that data, or?
Through the chair, while Matt's looking it up, we did look at each individual hamlet, at all the properties in them, and evaluated whether or not there was development potential there, and counted how many existing lots to be developed and how many could possibly be put in those other areas that are currently designated. So it's been a very detailed spreadsheet, map-by-map review, and I hope he soon has the numbers for you.
Well,
I
if
know
you
they're
don't
in the
have it right now,
residential-
that's fine if you don't
They're
have
in
it.
that study. They're in the residential land supply study.
To
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chair, the residential land supply, the identified capacity in the hamlets and rural areas, but this is basically in the hamlets, is over 1,000 units.
Okay, thanks very much.
I'm sort of reading that on the fly. If I'm incorrect, I'll advise you, but
Okay.
I think it's, the need over the 20-year period is about 800 units, and the surplus is about 277 units over the 20-year period. So as part of that residential land supply report, I went through each of the, I think there's over 40 hamlets. I went through each of them with the mapping I obtained from the geographic information people, staff, and they provide very detailed mapping, and I went lot by lot, and that's how that number came about.
Okay, moving on to, it used to read agricultural area, now you're changing it to rural area. And then if I go further down, I think you're taking out prime agricultural land and just making it agricultural land. Why would you take out agriculture and put in rural, first of all, at 3.7 on page 41? Go ahead, Councilor Height.
No, you had your hand up for a while.
Okay.
I wanted to talk about hamlets, and I'm wondering why Clear
Okay,
Creek
sorry.
isn't one.
Bang your desk.
Through the chair, Clear Creek does not meet the criteria that's in that section. I don't have it, where was that red part? Page 38. So it doesn't have the minimum 25 residential units. The other issue that I've found in looking at that is the erosion prone area. So that 100-year erosion comes, that line comes basically right up to the road. And so the dwellings that are below that are actually not within what you would identify as a hamlet area, so it makes it a very, very small area. So we know it's a historic area that has had a settlement for a long time, and we do recognize that, but it just doesn't have enough of these criteria met that it could be established as a hamlet.
Well, it certainly does possess a historical identity as a hamlet, and considering all of the shoreline protection, it should have reduced the erosion hazard line that would have put it well within the 25 units, I'm sure. When I look at this and I compare it to, say, Frogmore, I'm thinking Clear Creek could qualify. I believe the erosion protection works reduces that setback. If it's protected, it can't erode, therefore you have a smaller setback.
Through the chair, I have looked at it before in detail, but I can undertake to look at it again.
You can? Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Councilor Height, if I miss you, just scream at me and I'll make sure you're on the list. I apologize if I missed you. Okay. Moving on to the calling it rural area rather than agricultural area. Go ahead.
To you, Mr. Chair, the reason for that is in section 4 that follows, you also have an agricultural land use designation. And agriculture in 3.7 is meant to be a broader term that includes other land use designations under it. It would include provincially significant wetlands, hazard lands, some institutional areas, a variety of different land uses. So it's meant to be a broad term. So when I was reading the official plan, reviewing it, I found it quite confusing, where you have agriculture means one thing in one part of the plan and something else elsewhere. So I'm trying to reduce that confusion. I think when I was looking over this section the other day, probably a broader or better explanation might be appropriate to add in to 3.7 to explain why or what that rural area is about.
Okay, that'll certainly make it clear. Councillor Black.
Same issue. I've always found it rather confusing. If you severed a piece of property in the rural area or an agricultural area, it's an agriculturally zoned property, and it remains agriculturally zoned, but it's now a rural residence. So are you saying that confusion is going to be straightened out with this 3.7 or 371, or is that what you're talking about?
To you, Mr. Chair, no.
Well,
But the plan in the agricultural land use section does talk about the potential of creating a separate zone category for residential lots that are created or have been created in the agricultural area. That's an option that the county may pursue down the road.
but they're still, when they're severed, they're still agricultural zoned. Like, well, that's pretty confusing. So is that severed lot still, you can still have it as a farm, according to the zoning?
Through the chair, this section is talking about the community structure, which is Schedule A. And what Councillor Black is talking about is really things that have to do with Schedule B, which is the land use designation for agriculture. And what's in the zoning implements that agricultural designation and all of those things you're talking about. What this section of the official plan is talking about is what is our community structure? So we have urban areas.
Yeah,
We
okay,
have-
that's fine, but I just asked, someplace in this plan, is that confusion being straightened out someplace in the plan?
So you were talking about the agricultural designation, and when you do something like create a rural residential lot,
It's still agriculture.
it's still agriculture, that's correct. So when we get into that section of the plan, we're going to talk about how we're going to put policy in that we might change that zoning.
Okay,
It's something that council might consider, but yeah.
all right, thanks.
Okay. Further? Not. Lakeshore. Lakeshore Special Policy Area. Long Point and Turkey Point Resort Areas, safe access. Sorry? No, I don't. Did I miss it? Let me go back. What page are you on? Page 43? Oh, yes, sorry. Industrial influence areas. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at the one here, and it talks about the industrial influence area, the Lake Erie Industrial Park, which is Haldeman County. So I guess in between that and Port Dover, as I read it, you're only allowing agricultural stuff to happen?
Through the chair, I've just put up on the map so you can see where that area is. Because of the industries that are in Haldeman County, there was, at the time that they were established, an industrial influence area, trying to avoid conflict with residential uses with the big three, because those types of uses, when they had been located elsewhere, it had a lot of conflict with residential uses. And so this area was set up and policies was set back at that time to not permit additional residential in that area. I do recall a study being done very specific about additional even rural lots being built on, and the results and council agreement in the day was that they wouldn't permit that, because the whole idea of the industrial influence area was to avoid human exposure to the potential contaminants from those industrial sites.
Well, with the thermoelectric generating station being gone, is that still applicable? Or could it at least not be reduced? I see Port Dover growing to the east, and you have a 3-kilometer restriction based on a plant that's no longer there.
It would be a consultation with Haldeman County. I would suggest through the chair that would be needed to look at doing that, and I've heard no indication from Haldeman County that they're interested in reducing this in any way. In fact, they've been at board hearings to advocate their position that this be maintained in the past.
So we're letting Haldeman dictate to us? Is that how it works here? Because Oxford does it too? Like, I don't see why you couldn't relook at that and possibly have a reduction, considering your biggest coal generating station is no longer there. And the way it is labeled right now, you can only use it for agriculture. What about, I know there's houses there, I'm sure of it. Or what about some marine commercial?
Mr. Baird, you had something you want to add?
Mr. Chairman, Councillor Height makes a good suggestion that maybe that's something we can review. But keep in mind, there's also other industries, Lake Erie, SO, some of those that perhaps are as equally challenging. But we can certainly look at it.
Is that where Hoover's is, the marina, or is it in Haldeman?
Hoover's Marina is in Haldeman County.
It is?
Yeah.
So we could have a marina there, except we don't allow for the zoning?
I'd defer to our experts here in terms of that use, if that would be appropriate. But we'll see what they say. Thank you.
Through you, the chair, it's my understanding that Hoover's Marina is, for all intents and purposes, a legal non-conforming use in Haldeman County, and I only say that from my experience of working in Haldeman County. And that industrial influence area does include Hoover's Marina, and there's still the potential there. It's not just the big three industries, but there's still the potential there for industrial development in Haldeman, which has cross-jurisdictional boundaries with Norfolk.
But we're restricting marine commercial use, which should be allowed, in my opinion.
Any thoughts on that from anybody?
Through you, the chair, I'd say that's something that planning staff can look into and probably request some dialogue with Haldeman County and then get back to you.
Further? Councillor Height, are you done? Councillor Columbus.
Mr. Chairman, I wanted to go back to page 42 here, back to agriculture. And item D here on page 42 talks about this designated specialty crop area again. And I thought at the Ag Advisory Board that it was suggested that we did not want that handle put on Norfolk County, and I see it in here. And I thought, sometimes you got to be careful what you ask for. And it might, that kind of a designation may actually hurt some of the things that we've got going on with value-added industries and that type of thing.
To Mr. Chair, the policies being reworded, basically to say that the county will undertake an evaluation of agricultural lands when guidelines for the identification of specialty crops are released by the province. It says that we'll take an evaluation. It doesn't say it's going to designate. And we'll consult with the community to determine the appropriateness of designating specialty crop areas. So any designation will be through an amendment to this plan and based on provincial guidelines, but it'll also be based on the evaluation that is carried out, whether it's an advantage to Norfolk farmers or and to the community or not. So it's certainly not a commitment to designate. It just says that you will evaluate it. And the provincial policy statement does have
Did say shall.
yeah, formally the policy said that the county shall identify, and we're saying we're taking that policy out of the plan.
So you're saying we still have the option to say we do not want to designate a special crop area? We have that option.
Yes.
Okay, because sometimes you got to be careful what you ask for.
One of the things we talked about a little while back, and I'm not just sure it should be in here, but maybe it does. What about farm splits? Are we going to get something back from planning staff as to how that could possibly happen? I'm not saying it should happen, but there may be cases, and you can look at a winery. 50 acres of vine will give you a pretty good income. So how do we deal with that if it ever happens? That's basically my question. So I don't know whether it's here or somewhere else. So I'm looking for you to tell me where it is, and we'll go from there.
Through the chair, it is in the agricultural designation section, so we'll get to that later.
Okay, thank you. Lakeshore Special Policy Area. Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is on page 47 at the top, where it talks about the Long Point and Turkey Point safe area, or area safe access. Two questions in that section. First of all, the fact that we're deleting the reference to enacting the flood response plan, I'm guessing that that's because that in fact is now happening, and therefore those words no longer need to be there. Is that correct, first of all?
I think that was direction that we received when we went through the issues and options report from council to delete that language.
But the fact that and that may be the case, Matt, maybe council did direct that text be taken out, but where does that leave us with respect to the fact that we are in fact in the very final stages of having a draft access egress response plan prepared that we hope is going to come to council before the summer break, and that will have, we think, significant implications for additional development or redevelopment being allowed, for example, in Turkey Point or Long Point? Is there some risk in us now deleting that text?
Through you, the chair, professionally as planners, my answer or our answer would be yes, we think there is some need to still have that policy in the plan currently. As Matt outlined, it was a direction of council that it be taken out. At some point after the safe access or emergency plan is completed by staff at Norfolk County and the LPRCA in combination, there will be some sort of policy that needs to be added to the official plan once that's done. So by keeping that blue, what's crossed out in blue there in, it allows us at some point later in the official plan review process, if the timelines mesh, to change the wording when the plan is done, or at a later date, an official plan amendment will need to come before council in that regard.
Okay, so if we were to direct that text not be removed today, then would that streamline the process in coming months of utilizing and relying on that egress access plan to facilitate additional development opportunities? Will it be easier for that to happen if the text is reinserted here than if we delete it completely and suddenly there's no reference whatsoever to an emergency access egress plan?
Through the chair, staff continued to move forward with that project at council's request anyway, but it is a nice placeholder if council wishes to reinstate that policy in here.
Okay, well, Mr. Chair, and I'm really relying, I want Councillor Height to jump in on this too, because obviously he's been a champion of trying to get this thing done, as we all are. I think in light of what Pam has said, there might be some advantage in directing that paragraph be left in our OP, because it does essentially state that we are going to do what we're doing, which is to do that plan, and then to be able to rely on that plan, I think, in terms of making limited additional development opportunities safe. So that would be my request, Mr. Chair, that you maybe seek guidance from the rest of council on leaving that blued out paragraph in.
Okay. I have Councillor Height to talk. Did you want to talk on this issue as well, or?
Yeah, I have a few on this one, Mr. Chair. Thank you. And personally, as what I heard last week at council or a couple days ago, was that we'll have a plan in place by, or a staff report coming before our summer break. So I'd like to see it out of there because we're going to address the problem, right? And end of story. So one of the things here that I'm still waiting for some clarification. I've been speaking with the county manager, and that's Long Point and Turkey Point. You're getting the safe access and egress issue out of the Lakeshore Management Plan, I'm assuming?
Through you, Chair, the Lakeshore Management Plan is part of it. The safe access or emergency plan that we're creating is a separate piece.
I understand that, but out of the Lakeshore Management Plan, and it talks about the detailed study zones, it has Turkey Point being on the same label as Port Dover, as well as all the way to Haltom and into Peacock Point. Yet Long Point, it says specifically we need the municipal flood evacuation plan. I don't see why Turkey Point is being grouped in all the time, and yet Port Dover, I suppose, they're just as low, yet those people can walk out. Somehow they can get away, but Turkey Point can. In the Lakeshore Management Plan, as I understand it, it doesn't say that, and I'm still waiting for some clarification on that.
Through the chair, I think those are items that we can address through staff or with council when that safe access plan comes before council.
Okay, and on this resort area, we talk about you're not allowed permanent residents or residential units here, but we know they exist. And we know we have this in here, but we're really just kidding ourselves because if it's seasonal, okay, I like winter and fall. So then what do? I rent out my cottage in the summer? Because we all know the cottages are being rented for the winter. So there's tenants in there. Some of them are. Some people stay all the time. I don't know. It just seems that we're putting this in here, but we have no way to enforce it. And what is the really big deal over it all?
Through the chair, it's my understanding that there are different building code issues, there are servicing issues, water and the septic systems, whether they're built to cope with that. I think if the councillor wishes to do more work on this, have council do more work on this kind of study, it could be undertaken, but it's not part of this official plan review. We don't have the data in which to make big changes like this to our current policy. What I'm thinking of is there was, when the 75 conversions were permitted in Turkey Point, the Ontario Municipal Board required a study be done, and that study was done on what was in Turkey Point at the time, and it indicated that there needed to be further study done on the servicing of those dwellings and how, is 75 going to be the tipping point, or is it 80, or what? When do you reach the capacity of the soils in that area? When do you not have safe water in that area? When does it get to the point where you need to do some kind of municipal servicing? Are all questions that are out there. That second study, because it was felt was very elusive to come to what is the carrying capacity, was never carried out. And so I would suggest to council today that if you want to contemplate something like this is a separate project that needs a lot of data in order to back up what you're doing. And it probably needs to start with an updated lakeshore an updated lakeshore management plan by the Conservation Authority.
Okay, so we're just going to continue to send the school buses and garbage and kind of just garbage trucks and just put our heads in the sand and say, no, people don't live there all year round?
Through the chair, I would suggest if council wishes to change, they need to do the studies, the background in which to change it. It's not to ignore it, but to decide what they want to do.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Brunton and Councillor Columbus. Sorry, go ahead, yeah? Go ahead.
And my second question that I didn't get to ask was on that as well, and just to marry that wording in the bottom of the second paragraph that references permanent occupancy shall not be permitted. That wording was there before, and it in no way affects those residences in Turkey Point that have been grandfathered.
Chair, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Brunton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In addition to what Councillor Oliver has indicated, I guess I don't care what we do with it. I just want to make sure, like, why, if we're working on it, and I think we agree, at least some of us agree, that we need a plan for Long Point. I'm not sure Turkey Point, in my mind, should even apply, but why, I don't really want to come back and make a OP amendment. Why can't we put something in there now and just cover it off? Like, it doesn't make sense to come back in a month's time and put in an amendment to the thing. Am I out of line asking that, or?
Through you, the chair, simply because the work is not done. So to say that there is an emergency or safe access plan in Norfolk County for Long Point and Turkey Point would be incorrect at this point.
Well, let's, if there's no time frame, why don't we just drag our feet here, get the plan in place, and then pass the OP later on? Like, we're not that far off. Or we got a deadline that we got to have this done by?
Again, through you, the chair, if the timelines mesh and we can put that policy in this official plan review, we can do so. If not, then the policy, right now it's out, but if you put it back in, it would remain in. And at a later date, an official plan amendment would come forward for council.
I'm confused. I don't want to do an amendment. That'll maybe cause some debate. It might bring people, like the public would be invited to review that mandate, wouldn't they?
Through you, the chair, the public's always invited, as they are here today, to discuss policies in the official plan. So one way or the other, the public would be invited.
So the answer is to drag our feet before we do anything here. Slow it down till we get our plan.
Go ahead, Matt.
Through you, Mr. Chair. This document will go to draft form if council endorses it to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs in our plan. Hopefully that will happen in July, and they have a 90-day review period, and they will review they will review it with respect to provincial policies. They may request modifications, and that council will have to consider this fall. The formal public meeting for this official plan will not take place until after that. So we're looking at possibly doing that in November of this year. There may be some open houses, informal open houses as well as part of that consultation process. So there is time, I think, to change that policy depending what comes out this summer or before the summer break. And if council is satisfied with the plan that does come forward, we can add those changes to this document. It would have to be before the the public consultation process in the fall. So there's going to be some changes. The ministry may want some changes. So that, there is some opportunity. This is not the end of the road at this point.
Right. Okay.
So I think that's all I can say to that.
Well, then I guess, to me, it doesn't matter what's in there right now. I get the sense we got the time to put something in when it comes forward.
I would just say if it comes forward at a later date after the public consultation and that, then you would be a separate amendment. But hopefully the processes can merge and we can deal with it as part of this process.
Thank you.
Councillor Columbus, then Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question has been raised already, and it's with respect to these vacation homes. And it's mentioned there on page 44 and at the bottom of page 45 that they are not to be used for permanent use. Yet we know, they're being redeveloped to 4,000 square feet, some of them, and it is happening. So I guess it's a bylaw control issue more so than a planning issue, being that a vacation home can be used basically any time of the year, as Councillor Height mentioned. So I guess you've answered that question already, and don't know where that will go.
Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry to belabor this, but this is a pretty important one, I think, and we should spend the time on it. As I've listened to the discussion, I've heard opinions both in support of and not in support of bringing that paragraph back in. Quite honestly, I don't recall when exactly council gave the direction to remove it and what the rationale was, given, I think, the intent that we probably knew we would have to develop such a plan. In any event, right now, Mr. Chairman, I'm leaning towards asking council to direct that we put that paragraph back in. But I want to ask staff another question about this. In the second paragraph would be where I'm focusing my attention right now. And I'm okay with the wording that's in there now, the proposed wording, and that is that this plan recognizes that very limited new development will occur in these resort areas. However, what we know is happening in many, many cases is the redevelopment of an existing structure. And I'd like something in the plan, if it's agreeable, that we, in that same paragraph, that acknowledges that redevelopment of existing dwellings would be deemed acceptable, subject to safe access and egress being provided. So would the consultant comment on that? Is it appropriate to have such a line in there? Because that we know is what's happening and will continue to happen. And if the text of our OP recognizes that, then it presumably would make it easier for it to happen in the future, subject to safe access and egress.
Nat, did you want to comment on that?
That's a good suggestion, and I think we can deal with that.
Okay, all right. But that would be a request, Mr. Chair, that we add that wording about redevelopment of existing dwellings. And having heard Matt's response to that, Mr. Chairman, it would be my request or suggestion that council direct staff to reinsert that third paragraph under there. Because that specifically is what provides us with the direction to do the safe access egress plan.
Okay. Councillor Black, on this same subject?
Well, I'm going to voice my concerns on this, and I'm sure you all know that I have maybe a more environmental perspective on this. I don't think that Turkey Point or Long Point should be developed any more than it is. I have no problem with taking existing cottages and redeveloping them on the same footprints, but not increasing their square footage, because all of that creates a problem for water, sewer, as staff has indicated. And I do have a question through you, Mr. Chairman, to staff. I have a copy of the OMB ruling that bumped it up, the permanent residency, from, I think, 40, it was 40, I think, to 75. And I attended all those meetings, and I think in that document, it actually gives a date of when they can be there. And I think the date, something like the end of April to the end of October. And now I see it makes reference to seasonal. So when and how did that change? Because I'm pretty sure I just recently read that document and saw those specific dates that people could be there. Any other time, they weren't allowed to be there. So I wondered if Mary could respond to that.
Go ahead, Mary.
Sorry.
Through the chair, the Township of Delhi zoning bylaw had dates in it, so you could be there from whatever it was, May till October, something like that. And so at the time that that study was done, at the time that the board hearing was in, that Township of Delhi zoning bylaw was part of the evidence that was given at that time. What's happened since then is we have developed our Norfolk County zoning bylaw, and in doing that, we decided that all of the resort areas should be treated the same. Long Point did not have a date, it just said seasonally. The decision was made that the dates would be removed from the zoning and it would just say seasonal use, that it seemed appropriate that people could use their cottage when they wish to use it. So that's why we have no date currently in the zoning.
But the way I see it is by removing those dates and changing it to seasonal, you've encouraged people to redevelop and live there all year round merely by changing the dates to a specific timeline to seasonal.
Councillor Height.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I won't be supporting leaving that paragraph in. This has been ongoing since 1989. Would we defer the official plan for almost 30 years? Because I'd rather see that than let this emergency response plan not get dealt with again. Honestly, it's been almost 30 years. And now we're going to write it into our official plan? I don't know how many we've done in that time. But surely we can come up with that flood response plan. I'm still looking for verification that Turkey Point needs to get painted with the same brush as Long Point. And anytime somebody wants to answer that question for me, I'm all ears, because I don't read it like that. And I've read that plan 2 or 3 times by now. So if somebody with a professional planning designation would rule on that, I'd be happy. I don't see it that way. It shouldn't be in this group. I want this emergency response plan done. We're being negligent in our duties, knowing that for almost 30 years we've needed this plan and just have simply not moved forward with it. I'm not looking to pull this out in an official plan amendment some point down the road. I want it dealt with it ASAP. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Oliver, you had something you wanted added back in. Can you give me that page?
I do, Mr. Chairman, but it directly relates to what my colleague just said. And if you can, I just want to direct a question to him. Councillor, by putting this paragraph back in, does it not direct that we shall do what we are doing, which is to develop the emergency response plan? I guess I'm puzzled as to why you want the plan done, but you want reference to it deleted from our OP.
Well, because this is saying that we shall do it.
Yes.
I want it done. Not, we're working on it and it could take several more years while Councillor Height suffers all of the pain and agony of not having one.
And the point, and thank you for that clarification. But I think, for me, Mr. Chairman, reinserting the wording, if anything, will reinforce that it must be done, and we know it is being done now. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll move a motion. I don't know how you wish to handle these.
Okay,
but
well, you can put what, where are you? The clerk can...
Sorry, page 47.
47,
Section
yes.
3.8.3.
Yes.
Paragraph number 3. My recommendation would be that that be reinserted into the text, and further that text regarding redevelopment of existing dwellings subject to safe access and egress be inserted, not reinserted, but inserted in paragraph 2. I think staff have indicated they will attempt to come up with some wording that would do that. So that would be my motion.
That's your motion? Pam?
Through the chair, if it's council's desire, we could strengthen the word in that paragraph from the county shall enact an emergency flood response to the county will enact, if that assists.
I'm not sure which is more, more firm. They're both pretty firm words, Mr. Chair. I'm okay with the word shall, because it has, yeah, but we haven't done that yet.
So which is it going to be? I guess, Councillor Oliver, you put it forward as it is.
I've got it forward as it was worded there, Mr. Chairman, and
I guess we're going to have another kick at this before it goes to the province, I would think so anyway. So do you have basically the motion? Yeah,
I don't care if you'd
okay,
rather have
go
it.
ahead. Can you read it?
I'd done it a bit before when you were talking, so the order's a bit different. That paragraph 2 of subsection 3.8.3 be amended through the addition of allowing redevelopment of existing dwellings subject to safe access and egress, and that subsection 3.8.3 be amended through the reintroduction of the third paragraph reading, the county shall enact an emergency flood response plan in consultation with the Conservation Authority to address such matters as emergency warning, backup communications, and coordinated safe locations within the resort areas.
Yep, that's fine.
Any questions for Councillor Black?
What I'm not understanding, why the linkage between the redevelopment? Isn't the redevelopment already allowed through Committee of Adjustment, through you, to staff? Why the need for that? I don't have any problem with the emergency flood response. I mean, that's something that, yeah, I agree, it should have been done a long time ago, but why the connection between the redevelopment when it's already allowed through Committee of Adjustment to staff?
Councillor Brunton?
Well, I'm not asking Councillor Brunton, I'm asking staff.
Okay, fine, I didn't read out the question, so go ahead.
Well, I'm not asking you, I'm asking staff.
Ask staff. Go ahead.
Redevelopment is currently permitted, you are correct, through the minor variance process with the Committee of Adjustment. But I want to back up a minute and say, those uses that are there, that are legally existing, are permitted to go through that process, and though they go through Section 45(1) of the Planning Act. But there's also those that are there that are under that non-conforming, legal non-conforming, that have to go through that section. So either way, whether it's through the Planning Act that gives them the right to keep that building there, to strengthen it, to maintain it, but they can't increase it in size. So there's that aspect. But then there is the redevelopment, and they are permitted, again, to do that. Anyone is on their property. So we do have both the zoning process and the variance process in place to deal with those that wish to redevelop their property. We also are aware that the Conservation Authority, in their comments, they are permitting a certain amount of redevelopment as well. It's really recognizing that there is a long history of vacation homes being in this area, and that they should be permitted to continue that, despite it being hazard land.
Okay, and so do you have any problem with what Councillor Oliver is suggesting? Linking is redevelopment to the emergency plan?
I think it fits the intent of the provincial policy statement and other policies in the official plan.
Okay, well, based on what staff and their expertise, and not Councillor Brunton's, I will agree.
Councillor Brunton,
If you want to
so-
go ahead.
All I'll say is this has been a thorn in our side at LPRCA. That's why we're trying to bring it to the forefront and get it done. Anyways, thank you.
All those in favor, you've heard the motion. Those opposed, that is carried. Do you want to take a 10-minute break? Okay, we're going, sorry? I would think there's donuts, I'm not 100% certain, so if not, there might be some cookies left over from Tuesday.
On a strip of sandy soil lies a county called Norfolk. It's Ontario, south coast, you know, and it's surely not remote. If you pass through or spend a day or decide to call it home, you'll see why we love it here and are proud to call it our own. Norfolk, Norfolk, a southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger long. Take in the small town atmosphere, be amazed at all that we grow. Like our kids that go and see the world and can't wait to return home. Drop a line in a placid lake or stroll along the shore. Take a tour on a peaceful country road and bound to be back for more. Of Norfolk, Norfolk, my southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger long. With hard work we built a dream that only willing hands could do. It's on display at our fall fairs and at all the festivals too. Erie beaches, Carolinian forests, where the flower and dogwoods bloom. Patchwork fields and rolling hills, it's just the place for you. Norfolk, Norfolk, a southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger long. Norfolk, 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 you won't be a stranger long. On a strip of sandy soil lies a county called Norfolk. It's Ontario, south coast, you know, and it's surely not remote. If you pass through or spend a day or decide to call it home, you'll see why we love it here and are proud to call it our own. Norfolk, Norfolk, a southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger long. Take in the small town atmosphere, be amazed at all that we grow. Like our kids that go and see the world and can't wait to return home. Drop a line in a placid lake or stroll along the shore. Take a tour on a peaceful country road and bound to be back for more. Of Norfolk, Norfolk, my southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger long. With hard work we built a dream that only will